All right, Jonathan, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you for inviting me, Landon. I'm really glad and looking forward to our discussion.
That's great. That's great. Well, we have some important topics to discuss here. I know many buyers have brought this up many times, as well as sellers that are getting ready to sell their home. So it's really big. And I think, in fact, most foundation problems in Oklahoma City get discovered during a real estate transaction
Hmm.
when they're bought and sold.
Hmm.
That's when the home becomes under scrutiny and inspectors are checking it out.
Right.
And usually, from what I've noticed, most home inspectors and appraisers are the ones that first call out the issue.
Right.
They'll say, "Hey, looks like I need to get an opinion from a structural engineer on what's going on here." And then at that point, as real estate agents, we then contact an engineer and we get your opinion out there. And now your opinion is like, the law, if you will, when it comes to banks, for sure. When you say it's got a problem, it's got a problem. And the bank's going to expect that problem to be fixed. And then for you to come up and say, yes, the remediations that I've recommended have been done and completed according to these standards, and your stamp of approval goes on it. And then the bank begins to lend on it.
Right.
So I think really the curtails the bank standards, really wanting you to write that report.
Right. Yes, that is the process that I've discovered. And you're right. A lot of owners and buyers, they become it becomes realized to them all of a sudden once they're ready to sell their house, a crack that maybe's been there forever, but they notice it. And sometimes I've noticed that, if the earth shakes anywhere in Oklahoma, they begin to look at their house and they notice old cracks. So sometimes old cracks are not bad cracks,
Hmm.
right?
I know a lot of realtors know your name because it seems to be when I bring up your name, people know you. For those that maybe aren't from this area or don't know you, could you tell a little bit about your history? How'd you get involved in this line of work to begin with?
Yeah, thank you. My name's Jonathan Hill, like Landon said, and I'm a structural engineer. Been a structural engineer for 22 years. Graduated from Iowa State University with my civil engineer's degree and emphasized structures. And then roughly 10 or 11 years ago, I was transplanted here to Oklahoma.
Hmm.
And in Oklahoma, it's a unique structural market because of the clay soils.
Hmm.
Actually, when I drove in Landon,
Hmm.
I was driving, I think it was down I-35, and I was like, what is that? And it was all this red soil because we didn't see red soil up in Iowa and in the Midwest area. And that red soil, which, the reason why a lot of the houses down here are brick and everything like that, can cause an interesting structural market, especially in the residential. And it's because when that soil gets wet, it expands. When it gets dry, it really wants to dry. And I kind of got into this by accident because
Hmm.
primarily I cut my teeth in doing construction, commercial design.
New construction, new
Yeah, new
design. Sure.
construction. And it wasn't even residential,
Hmm.
more big box stores, university buildings, educational centers, banks, different things like that. That's what I'm
Hmm.
getting used to designing, all those type of vertical structures. So using wood, masonry, steel, all those products is what I've done. But I kept getting these calls.
Hmm.
Yeah, I kept getting these calls from residential, and eventually I'd say, no, thank you, no, thank you. But I'd hear the distress in a lot of their voices, and I love helping people. Outside of being an engineer, I just love helping people. And I realized that some of the knowledge that I've acquired could help some of these residents when they're running into issues with contractors or issues with their home when they want an unbiased, objective opinion. So I started taking the calls, and that was probably about 10 years ago. And as I've been taking those calls more and more, it's become a regular thing. And it supersedes the majority of my work. I do a lot of inspection work, commercial and residential now as a result of that. So that's kind of how I got ushered
Hmm.
into this.
Sure. You mentioned a really good point there. An unbiased, objective answer or report.
Hmm.
That's huge. So many people may think, you see these commercials on TV, foundation repair, we do it better, lifetime warranty, all that. However, when they come out to do an inspection, there's an inherent, conflict of interest there in that any problem that they discover, they're going to get paid more on or have the potential to get paid more on. Whereas when you come out to do a report, you're doing a report from a scientific point of view, just stating, here's the issues that I've discovered or maybe not discovered, and here's the report that I've found. What's the difference between those two when we talk about it? I mean, when someone's trying to figure out, do I call a structural repair company or do I call an engineer?
Yes. And I really believe that the engineers came on board, as a result of a lot of the lenders and everything wanting a professional opinion. But I think it's the professional opinion, the ethical obligation we have to the engineering board here, that anything we say, anything we write in writing, anything we draw up for plans, is considered legal and binding.
Hmm.
And with that type of weight, if you will, hanging over our heads,
Sure.
it allows us to leave a lot of our opinions behind. Because in a real estate transaction, there's a lot of pressures from a lot of sides, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the buyers are really wanting to buy the house
Mm-hmm.
and they don't care if it has a structural issue. And an engineer has to stay laser focused and judge the house and judge what's going on with the house, not the need for the buyer to buy it, the need for the seller to really sell because they've got another house that they're already paying a mortgage on, ready to move on. So an engineer is used to, I think, in their lifetime of being an engineer, dealing with pressures, but yet still having to make objective, clear decisions that they'll willing to be able to stand behind, even in court.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, it does separate us from, a foundation inspector who would be working for a company that may not be licensed. They can give good opinions because they're very knowledgeable here in Oklahoma. Experience can be a good teacher, but at the same time, it does eliminate that bias when you're a professional engineer with no loyalties, and the only financial gain you have is the cost of the report, which is usually a lot smaller than
Then a
the cost of the
foundation, yeah,
repair.
sure, sure. And the fact that you can be brought in before a judge at the end of that to testify with what you found.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's inspections that I've done, for insurance companies, and then those are the ones that can get more litigious and where you can end up in court more often than the real estate transactions. But no, these also can anything we put on the report, we're planning that this could get in some type of mediation. Because I've
Right.
had my report. We've been around long enough to my reports they begin to travel. They might travel to different owners and people say, he said this back then and it's doing that. So fortunately, I have not run into that yet.
Sure.
Thank God.
Sure. Well, I want to open it up and take some listener questions here. Amy writes in, she lives in Guthrie. Amy says, we've had a few earthquakes that woke me up in the middle of the night last year. And since then, while gardening, I've noticed several cracks starting to develop on the exterior brick in my home. I haven't seen any cracks on the inside, but is this something I should worry about?
I would say don't worry about it at all. Sometimes the cracks on a house can be instigated or initiated by an earthquake. And a lot of the earthquakes that have taken place, in the upper Edmond area, things like that, the earthquake damage is really apparent after the earthquake. The brick veneers, they're falling off houses and things like that. But what earthquakes can do is they can aggravate even cracks that are already existing. So like she mentioned the exterior of her house. Some of it could just be foundation settlement. And it really would take an expert like myself or someone else to come along and try to differentiate between the two, because sometimes it's really hard to tell if it was earthquake related or if it was related to a foundation issue. And some of the times the way I tell the difference is I try to look at when they first saw that crack, when it developed. And I actually do research and to look and see when the earthquakes took place and then how high on the Richter scale those earthquakes were to see if it can necessitate the type of damage that I'm seeing here. And a lot of times, cracks, stepped cracks in homes, it's a good identifier that it was more foundation settlement than just shaking, left to right. Shaking left to right can completely twist a house. So I'm also looking inside of the home to try to see, was any of the china displaced during the earthquake?
Sure.
Am I looking along at if you look on a wall and look all the way up at where the ceiling meets the wall, there's a joint there that's usually taped with gypsum board tape or anything. Am I seeing a lot of shearing and twisting in the corners of the house? So I'm looking for other evidence.
Horizontal movement, which wouldn't necessarily occur, or wouldn't occur with the foundation as much.
Yeah, foundation settlement would be more up and down, vertical. And remember, seismic is side to side, it's lateral. So I'm looking for other evidence to go along with this to, say it's purely earthquake. And if those cracks, are under 1/8 of an inch for that person that wrote that question, I would just keep it monitored while you're gardening, see if it's opening or opening further or even closing. Because what some people don't understand, and I went to this one house, it was so funny. I was looking at a window, right? And the brick kind of dies into the side of the window. It's called a jamb. And it was a smaller separation. Well, like right now, it's been raining,
Mm.
cats and dogs.
Mhm.
So usually
Mhm.
that's when the
Record
soil's
rains. Record
record.
rain. Actually, from August to September, that span has never had more rain in history. From
Wow.
August and September
Right.
combined, if you
Right.
combine those rain totals, never happened, before. I mean,
Right.
that's what they were talking.
So when it rains a lot, the ground wants to swell more, and then a lot of times cracks will close,
Mm.
and they will be narrower. And but then when it gets really dry, you'll find them opening. But then
Mm.
you have a freeze point in time where an inspector's coming in and look at it, and then you have to really be careful and try to look at the oscillation, if you will, of that crack opening and closing because it can open and close. So I would
Mm.
just have her, to specifically answer that question, just to monitor that crack. And when you see it getting
Mm.
wider, maybe an 1/8 of an inch, call somebody to come out and
What's
look
a
to see
good
if it's
object that's
foundation.
1/8 of an inch? What
Um,
pencil? I mean, what are we talking about here?
1/8 of an inch wide would probably be if you sharpen the pencil to its point.
Mhm.
All right, then back up to where the black meets the yellow part of the pencil.
There you
That
go.
point, I'd say that's roughly an 1/8 of an inch.
There you go, Amy. So if you've got a pencil at home, go ahead and sharpen that up and stick it in the hole. And if you get past that lead, it starts getting thick on you. I've even heard some folks say, playing card, but I think that's that's pretty crazy to get down to a playing card. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
playing
just
card is about
paper.
a 16th of an inch.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. Another one, and this is from John. John lives in California. He's an investor looking at our market here. He says, I would like to invest in OKC because I feel the home prices are low and I can get good returns on rent. Is Oklahoma City worse than average for foundation problems? Should I take this risk into account for my investments?
I would say for the South, which is a clay soil district, Oklahoma, Texas, and things like that. Oklahoma holds its own as far as its foundation damage. I wouldn't say it's any worse than anywhere else. Now, if I'm comparing Oklahoma to the Midwest, it's totally different,
Mm,
completely different. I mean, the Midwest, the frost depth of soil goes down to 42 inches. Here, it
mm,
only goes down to 12 inches. So the primary issues in foundation in the Midwest, it deals with ice,
mm.
and freezing and actually lifting houses. Down here is a different nature of a problem, and I wouldn't say that Oklahoma is any worse than any place else. So, considering the lower real estate prices, I believe that the investment is worth the risk because we have tools. There's foundation ways to mitigate that risk and minimize that risk through foundation piers and other means to try to help alleviate what the soil failed in. So I
Mm.
think there's ways around that, and I wouldn't at all avoid Oklahoma as far as an investment, especially when the price is right.
That's right.
Right,
That's
because
right. These problems are financial problems ultimately.
they
I
are.
mean, yeah.
Yeah, and if you maintain a house, Landon, even though there are clay soils, and I don't know if that's a question anybody asked or if I should expound on that more, but clay soils when they get wet, they want to expand, and when they get dry, they want to crack. So if you're looking around your house and your property and you see something that looks like it's an earthquake hit my yard, you
Mm.
know,
Yeah, no, we get that in the summertime.
right?
Sure.
There's cracks all in my yard. Well, it's not necessarily just earthquake. That just means that your ground is very dry.
Mm.
And when you leave your ground very dry and you get these polygonal type cracks all around, and especially if up
Mm.
against your house, you see a separation forming,
Mm.
that means that you have not been watering enough during a dry season. And clay wants to stay at a stable state. It
Mm.
doesn't want to get too wet or it'll lose its structural consistency, and it doesn't want to get too dry. It'll lose its structural
So it'll
consistency.
try to repel water or what does it do any bit of modification in itself or it's just there and it just absorbs whatever water it gets and then
Well, that's a good question, Landon. When clay absorbs the water, it
Mhm.
grows and it expands, and
Mm.
it can lift. It can lift an
As opposed
entire
to
house.
sand, which I mean,
Right.
sand just stays the same,
Yeah,
right? I
sand
mean,
is more permeable, and the
uh-huh.
water the microscopic holes that are between the sand granules, the water can travel through there, but not with clays,
Mm,
and clays will expand more. So
mm,
what happens is, if you got to make sure those cracks that are opening, and then it rains through those cracks, and then the
sure.
water gets down and it begins to erode the foundation soils that are around your soils or existing piers, and it doesn't have that stickiness or
Mm,
adhesion,
mm.
technical word, but stickiness for a non-technical word. And then that's when you get soil bearing failure and your foundation settles. So
Wow.
maintaining water and water drainage,
Yeah.
wouldn't you say, Landon? I mean, your experience?
Well, I mean, I see home inspection report after home inspection
Yes,
report, and they're constantly saying, "Get the water away from the house and the gutters," and the elevation. They'll ask for an increase in elevation away from the house, like so that the soil is pitched away from the house,
exactly.
because you'll have one side of the house that obviously all the water is settling. And what they say, they've told these folks, go out there 10 minutes after a rain and see where that water's sitting on your
Exactly.
property, and then do something about it. Don't just, guess, but
Right.
actually watch what the water's doing. But if you have one side of your house collecting all the water and the other side's not, that is a recipe for foundation disaster.
It is. It is. And you got to recognize that what's going on outside your house is not going on inside of your house. So inside is meaning
Mm.
a constant temperature. Let's say it's dry. And there's some people have created foundation problems with irrigation, even.
Mm,
I mean, they have the heads of the irrigation all along the side of a house. And in a medium density neighborhood, sometimes you don't have a lot of distance between your house and the lot line.
sure.
So, and then they oversaturate that clay soil. And then when it's oversaturated, it loses its consistency. And sometimes the foundations may even want to roll outward.
Mm,
And you might
mm.
not see cracks in the brick, but what you do see inside of the house, every wall that dies into that exterior wall, you see a separation going vertically at that joint and where it
'Cause
connects,
it's pulling the room apart at the
pulling
seam.
apart.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Which over time on some of these houses is just gonna happen. I mean, some of these are 1908 builds when we get into downtown Oklahoma City. I know that I've had folks for, an inspection report's come back and said, "Hey, actually it's doing alright. Like, there's maybe some minor, support we can do
Right.
here, but, and the floors are, crooked." And it's what they call plasticizing or plastizing wood, where it's just pulling apart over time, hundreds of years. These houses
Hmm.
120 years old, some of them,
Yes.
and the wood itself is just kind of stretched over time.
Yeah, that's true. Wood
And
wood creeps. It's called, actually, that's the technical term. I'm not
there
calling
you
you
go.
a creep, Landon.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
No, I'm saying
Okay, I'm
wood.
glad we got that
No,
out of
no,
here.
no, no,
No
no, no.
creepers
You're
allowed on
my
the
friend.
show.
No creepers. We
Yeah,
allow no
yeah,
creepers, but wood will
yeah.
creep with, and
And
a
that's part of the
sag.
character of the home. I mean, come on, you're buying a home that's
Mhm.
75, 80 years old. Folks are getting away from the track homes to buy these homes. They want something unique. Well, if the
Exactly.
floor is a little crooked, that's part of it. And I think probably in 1908, when 1907 Oklahoma was formed. So 1908, this house was built a year after. Plenty of them in Putnam Heights and along Classen. These houses were built like as Oklahoma was being built. Maybe the wood wasn't as straight then. I
Yes.
mean, we have machine pressed boards now, right? There's
Yeah.
just like thousands of weights.
And
Back then,
some of those wood boards, though, are stronger than the new
there you
boards they're
go.
making.
There you go.
And I do a lot of older home inspections, and my tolerance level changes with an older home. Because
Mm,
number one, it's been there a long time, so I enjoy looking at older homes because any problems
mm,
that existed,
the
the house
scale.
the house
Yeah.
has already communicated that.
Yeah.
The question is have they repaired it, or have
Mm,
they kept putting band-aids over it?
mm,
And then that's when I know if there's a continual band-aid, and yeah, if I describe the band-aid, there's a crack in the brick, it was maybe caulked,
yep.
or
You see
maybe
that a
it was
lot.
tuck pointed, but then it opens again or opens
Yep.
again. So there's a signature, if you will, of how many times it's been repaired. Well, let's fix the problem.
Let's
Y-
deal with it.
Yeah, and a lot of the older foundations, believe it or not, they go deep, and they made them more firmer than some of the newer
Mhm.
foundations they've
That's
made.
right. Those stacked stone and stuff you see. Yeah, those are actually, it's kind of impressive to see them. Most of them now, when you go in these older homes, especially Mista Park, you get down in the basement and they've done some covering, some cosmetic covering, or maybe weather barrier,
Mhm.
stucco or something like that, or concrete blocks in front of it. occasionally you'll see one that the original stack stone is still open and you can still see, these stones that have been laid by somebody born in
Yes,
1880.
a long time ago.
I mean,
Before I was
he
born,
was
at
probably
least.
wearing a suit while he was doing it too, handmade suit, made in America. Okay, so you get a recommendation, right? A lot of times it says one or two things, sometimes three or four, but it'll say, I recommend concrete piers or steel piers. What's the difference between those main two sources? You have foundation guys will tell you all the time, oh, well, I can put concrete piers in for $300 a piece or blah, blah, blah. But the engineer may say, no, 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 you need a steel pier in there. What's that distinction? What's going on there? Why are we calling for a steel pier? What's the importance of it? What's the different types of treatments when it comes to foundation repair?
Well, that's a good question. Piers have existed since before we were born. And what it is it's a way to get to a deeper strata of soil that may not be as volatile or that may be more firmer than the existing
The
strata.
topsoil.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's topsoil or even if the strata below that. And, ideally, especially in newer uh, developments and things like that, ask to see the foundation soils reports to see, is it a lot of clay soils? And then a lot of
Mm,
times, if there have been a lot of clay soils, they'll build all the houses originally with piers. I don't want to get confused with the
mm,
aftermarket
sure.
post-installed piers that we're talking about.
Hmm.
But a lot
Hmm.
of the houses will have original piers to try to get down to that lower
And
strata of
that's based
soil.
on that soil sample test. And do they have to do that on each plat, or is that something that they do the whole plat map when the development gets created, or do they do that for each lot?
My experience and when I've talked to is a lot of times they do tests of different areas for the whole plat.
Mm,
I don't think they do it at each individual home unless it's
I
individually
gotcha.
requested. And I could be wrong on that, but
Hmm. Well, it certainly would make sense from a cost standpoint.
right. But that's important to do. Then
Hmm.
that lets you know what type of foundation system you need.
Mm,
But to your question, then aftermarket, if there is a problem, driving steel piers in the ground, that's what I'm more comfortable with. They also have concrete, um, they call them pressed piers, where I
mm,
believe they're pressing them down in the ground, and some of them have a cable that they may run through to try to give it some tensile strength.
mm,
And there's a different product. There are
mm,
different products, and they perform in different ways. I personally, I'm not trying to ostracize anyone that does concrete because they will perform and will do well. But on my reports, I recommend steel piers just because I'm more comfortable with understanding how that may work
mm.
in clay
Okay.
environment. I just know that clays do a lot of shifting,
Mm,
and there's a lot of shifting below ground that we don't even know about.
mm,
And I just more comfortable with a vertical piece of steel pipe that would be going down 20 or so feet than a bunch of stacked concrete or anything like that that could end up shifting and rocking and rolling or just moving with the soil. And you don't really want to put a pier in that's going to move with the soil.
mm.
You want it to be independent and bypass, the soil. That's what you would want. And the only thing you would rely on is the skin friction, which would mean the side of the pipe as it connects with the soil and it rubs together. You want that
Mm.
to create some type of a friction to be able to create more force to support your house. And if I keep talking too much, I'll get all nerdy and stuff with
No,
technical things.
hey, the folks that aren't into nerdiness are already off the show.
Oh, they're already
They
gone. I've
they
lost them.
they listen to the first 10 minutes. You know who you are. You listen to the first 10 minutes to get the market report, and the real estate
Yeah,
connoisseurs stay on for
yeah.
the B phase of the
So we're
show.
talking to the real
We're
people now.
talking to the real folks. You
Well,
know who you are.
the
I
real
get your
folks.
comments all the time. I love it. Appreciate it. The real buffs.
Yeah,
So going nerdy now,
let's get
entering the
nerdy.
nerd zone.
Nerd zone.
Okay, let's get to the yeah. So okay, bedrock then. If we're gonna go nerdy, I get this question all the time. They go, Landon, are we going down to bedrock? And I'm like, what do you mean by bedrock? And they go, well, when the earth's just solid core, and then we'll push off of that. And I want my house on bedrock.
Right.
Does that exist?
Uh, I,
Is that a
I,
fantasy?
some of my foundation people I work with, I'm going to start quoting me if they listen to this, but, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that they're driving down the bedrock. What they are driving down, and a lot of them have pressure gauges when they are driving their piers down in the ground. They're driving down to where they get a high pounds per square inch on their dials, and they're considering that strong. But I'm not going to say it's always down to bedrock, because bedrock varies all across the state,
Mm.
and it's not probably cost. It costs too much to say I'm going down to bedrock on every one of my peers. So if somebody's selling that they're going down to bedrock, I don't
Yeah.
want to say that. I'm going down to a firm strata of soil that'll get me, 12,000 psi, whatever it is, or it'll get me my 2,000 pounds per square foot, whatever gauge it is. That's something that's reasonable.
Sure.
But to claim bedrock, I wouldn't necessarily do that.
I've heard. Elisa, can you Google the how deep is bedrock in Oklahoma City? I want to say I've heard numbers, and this was by I want to say Ramjack, one of his Chuck came out to one of the sites,
Sure.
and we were talking, and he said literally when people say that bedrock's like 700 feet. I mean, it's just some crazy number over Oklahoma City because it's an ancient sea. Aren't we on an ancient seabed here?
You're getting into geology and some things I don't know. Landon, you're a deep guy.
Well,
you said that, and you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say, yeah, we are on an ancient sea. So go ahead, tell me about that, Landon.
Well, actually, Elisa, we're going to get you a mic next show, but she worked for Devon Energy for a while, and she's just been telling me she was actually a geologist.
Now
She
they
had
know.
a degree in geology.
Yes.
Yeah. You're not a geologist. She has a minor in geology. That gets her in the club. Getting there.
Yeah, but bedrock, I wouldn't go selling. If somebody's selling that, they're embellishing up slightly.
It's snake oil. Okay, snake juice.
A firm strata of soil, that's the best way to say it.
So we've got down to 12,000 psi or 8,000 psi. We've stabilized the home. Are we lifting the home or just supporting it? When do you know the difference between those two?
Well, if there's been settlement and there's room to lift it, and a lot of times you can tell. Let's take an exterior wall, for example, that has shown signs of settlement. There's step cracks that are opened in the brick veneer, and you can tell it's settled down. And maybe at the baseboards of your home, you actually see a separation between the baseboard and your floor slab, so there's a gap there.
A cosmetic, something that's visually affecting your interior.
Yes. And if they can see that, they can lift slightly, but it's dangerous to lift too much.
Busting windows.
Right, because sometimes lifting, you can overlift, and then it's hard to get it back down, and then you can lift and cause more cosmetic issues. And a lot of times I recommend for them to stabilize what is there and lift if possible. Sometimes on corners, it's better to do some lifting because you can lift that corner and bring it back level. And, when you go outside of your house, there's this piece of wood. It's like a 1x2 piece of wood that's at the top of your brick veneer. Some call it a wood freeze board or a wood piece of trim, whatever. And that, where it meets at the corner of houses, exterior is really a telltale sign of how much the foundation has moved. So lifting sometimes can bring that back into play. And but I've talked to a lot of foundation guys, and even myself, I don't always recommend lifting, unless there's a distinct corner that can be lifted. But I do recommend stabilizing so that it doesn't go down any further.
That's right. And we stabilize both sides of the home or just the side that's sinking? I mean, there's thoughts there that if you stabilize the side that's sinking, well, now the other side's just going to sink differently, and you really have to stabilize the whole thing. I mean, we get into that whole game.
Yeah, it's definitely a judgment call. I've scratched my head a lot on homes because you don't want to introduce something that's really firm like a pier or anything in one area and then not the others, because that'll cause sometimes the foundation to crack. Because it's really firm right there at that point. And then it's the house, as a house does, and everybody doesn't know, so the house may move slightly all the time with the soil, but then in that point it's firm.
Sure.
So then I have to make a decision. Should I do the whole wall? Should I just do this point? So it really does get to be a designing type objective call with the placement of piers. Yeah, but one side to another. Landon, I'm going to tell you, sometimes it could be a strip of soil that just was not compacted well. And then that's why you're seeing foundation damage in that one portion of your house. So in that case, yes, just put it in that portion. Don't worry about the other.
And then treat the stuff on the topsoil like we talked about before, the water, the issue going on with sprinkler systems, that kind of thing. I remember seeing a house in Midwest City, it was like 23rd and Post, that the northeast corner of the home was sinking into the ground. And what we found during kind of the investigation was that there was an outdoor spigot that had broken loose, and the owners had just put a little cap over the top of it, but had still continued to leak down the wall, and it was just a constant drip of water over years.
Years. Right.
That had dripped in that portion of the home, and now their home had needed a structural issue or piers added to stabilize that portion of the home because of this one spigot
Hmm.
that when we had a plumber come out and fix was like $120 total
Right.
thing that
Right.
had they caught that early and said, you know what? Water leaking on one side of my house is a problem and it could cause these massive repair issues. Let me just go ahead and get it fixed now.
Yes.
That could have been a totally different. So I'm going to encourage folks on that.
Yep.
Listen, I know you're a busy guy. You got to get off to the next thing. I really appreciate you coming by here. Is there anything that we forgot that maybe people might think about or ponder when they're looking at their home right now and they're going, geez, because there's that nervous feeling, right? Let's just say this could be thousands of dollars in repairs, and a lot of people procrastinate making those calls because they don't want to hear that answer. They don't want to hear, gosh, man, now I got to do something about it. Kind of coach me through that. What do you recommend for somebody that's kind of on the edge, like, man, do I call? Do I not call? Is it going to get worse if I don't call? Should I go ahead and call? What's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? What do you recommend for those folks?
Yes, I would just recommend as far as cracks in your home, if you're outside looking around, you're starting to notice cracks in your home or cracks inside of your home. It's best to try to catch things early because I'm just piggybacking off what you just finished with. Water is what creates a lot of the issues. So to all the homeowners, I would just encourage them, number one, just do a 360 around your house. Do I have gutters that would be directing my roof water at least 36 inches away from my house? Because sometimes gutters, they catch it, then it goes down to the downspout, but then they have the downspouts pointed directly at the foundation. So they're creating an issue by shooting all that water down the downspout right there. So you need extensions on your downspouts also to carry that water. I recommend at least 36 inches away from the house. So look around your house for that.
That's it.
And then also look around your house for puddling and ponding water that's just standing when it's raining. And if so, go ahead and just do it yourself. Grab some dirt and slope the ground away from your house. And then make sure you put some type of vegetation or grass or something over it so that the dirt doesn't wash away. But you just want the rain from heaven to make sure it's hitting the side of your house and going away from your house.
Evenly, yeah. And the idea is that the soil dries and gets wet evenly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And then inside of your home, if you continue to see a lot of doors sticking and you continue to see cracks within your doors, let's say the corners at the tops of your doors that are continuing to open and close and things like that, you could have an interior floor slab issue. And it could be an interior leak, and you may need to get a plumber to come out and scope some of your underground plumbing pipes and to make sure there's not a leak. When you see something, I would recommend, inspection fees are not that high. Across the board of Oklahoma City and all my other colleagues and guys I work with around this city that do this, it's not as expensive to go ahead and find out, is this something that's going to cost me thousands of dollars later? I was in the house the other day. They had all the carpet, all the tile ripped up, and it looked like a train almost had ran through the slab and then caused it to crack because of a water leak that had continued to progress over time. And when water has no place to go, it's going to find its lowest spot.
Wow.
Or it's going to cause the slab to heave in some areas. That means pop up, because if that water gets down and hits that clay and the clay expands, it wants the slab to heave up. And in some areas, it's going to settle because it's eroded a path. It found its way out the house. So it's eroded a path.
And then it may have frozen at some time.
Yeah. And, Oklahoma, when it gets cold, yes, it can freeze. So
a quick way, fun fact for you people that may not know, you can turn off all your fixtures inside your house, head on out to your street, and if that meter's still spinning on the water meter, you have the meter in the front of your house. 90% of our homes in Oklahoma City have the fresh water coming in as out your front door, kind of next to the road. You'll pull up that panel there, and you can see there's a meter in there, and it's spinning. Right. It's charging you money for the, it's recording how much gallons so that they can bill you. Well, if you turn off all the fixtures in your house and it's still spinning, That's a good sign that you have a slab leak somewhere or some other leak that you need to find. You need to call a plumber, get that sorted. And then if you discover we do have a slab leak, your next call is going to be an engineer to make sure that no damage has been done that needs to be dealt with before you have massive cracks
That's right,
and
Landon.
shifting. Yeah.
I agree.
So, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, if you want to get a hold of me, my cell phone is 405-443-7802. And I'm in and out of inspections all the time. So texting is great for me because it allows me to respond a little bit faster. So 405-443-7802. A website is Hill Structures, hillstructures.com. And you can go there, or you can email me at hillengineering@gmail.com. So those are 3 ways you can get a hold of me.
And folks, we'll have those links in the bottom of the description on the bottom of this post. Also, keep in mind, Jonathon Hill is really recognized by several huge lenders in town. In fact, I can't think of a single big player in the real estate world that doesn't know your name.
Really?
I mean, every agent that I've talked to, and I said, like Mary Hatch, for example, with Dwell, we just had a discussion about that, and I said, okay, we'll try to get Jonathon Hill out there, and she's like, oh yeah, I know Jonathon Hill, and that's important because when both sides of the transaction have a trust in you, they're going to be more excited that you're coming out because they trust that your results are going to be objective.
Right.
You're not going to be playing favorites here. You're not going to be saying, well, I know this seller, I really want to try to make sure he sells this home. No, you're going to give the facts because, again, you maybe end up in court, but also, too, I really feel like you're a genuine guy. You really want the best for both parties. And, hey, here's the facts. Here's what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, Landon, like a lot of the other real estate agents, you're really knowledgeable. And I know you said all those nice things about me, and I appreciate them. But the landscape of real estate agents here are really knowledgeable, and you can just tell by some of the things you educated me on.
Good stuff.
Here, I didn't know if I was interviewing you or you were interviewing me because.
Did we get the Stratus, by the way? Are we? No. We'll pin that at the bottom of the
that's the bonus.
Interview. Yeah, the bonus question. Yeah. So maybe somebody write that in, listeners. If you know, how far is bedrock down in Oklahoma City? I'm going with 700 feet.
Well, I'm gonna go look it up as soon as I get off
there we go. All right, Jonathon, thanks for coming by the studio. You're welcome anytime.
All right, thank you very much, Landon, for inviting me. I've enjoyed myself.
All right.